For 3 years, the house breathed through me. That's how it felt, like if I stopped, everything would collapse. Grandma's old two-story home, once loud with holidays and laughter, had grown quiet and fragile, just like her. The stairs groaned louder than she did. The walls held memories no one else came back to visit, and when the doctor said she couldn't live alone anymore, everyone suddenly had excuses. I have work. My kids need me. I'll come on weekends. Weekends never came, so I moved in. Not because anyone asked me to, but because Grandma's hands trembled when she tried to button her sweater, and her eyes searched the room whenever she woke up at night. Someone had to be there, and somehow that someone became me. Days blurred into routines, morning pills lined up like soldiers on the kitchen counter, blood pressure checks, slow walks to the window so she could watch the birds she named after neighbors who no longer visited. I learned which spoon didn't hurt her gums, which blanket calmed her shaking, which stories she liked repeated when the pain kept her awake. At night I slept lightly, listening for the sound of her calling my name. My aunt, her daughter, came twice that first year. Once for a birthday, once for a holiday photo. She brought expensive fruit baskets and louder opinions. She'd kiss Grandma's cheek, tell her, "You're strong, Mom," then whisper to me in the kitchen about selling the house someday, like Grandma wasn't still alive in the next room. "She's lucky to have you," and my aunt would say already halfway out the door, then she'd disappear again. The second year was harder. Grandma forgot things, names, dates, sometimes even me, but her hands always recognized mine. When the confusion faded, she'd squeeze my fingers and say, "You stayed." Just that, like it was everything. I never asked about money, never asked about the house. Love doesn't keep score like that. I paid bills when I could, fixed what broke, turned down job offers that would have taken me away. This was my life now. I chose it. One evening, during a storm that rattled the windows, Grandma asked me to bring her the old folder from the hallway cabinet. It was thick, yellowed, tied with a faded ribbon. I tried to give it to her, but she pushed it back toward me. "Keep this safe," she said softly, "just in case." "In case of what?" I asked, smiling. She didn't smile back. "In case people forget who was here." That night, she cried in her sleep. The third year came with hospital visits and longer silences. Machines beeped where conversation used to be. I sat beside her bed, reading to her even when she couldn't respond. When she could still speak, she told me stories about the house, how she and Grandpa bought it with saved coins, how every room held a promise. "This house knows you," she whispered once. "It knows who loved me." When her condition worsened, suddenly everyone showed up. My aunt took charge, talking to doctors, signing papers, making calls. She barely looked at me. "I'll handle the paperwork," she said sharply. "You've done enough." It didn't sound like thanks. The last time Grandma squeezed my hand, her grip was weak but certain. Her eyes met mine, clear for just a second. "Don't let them tell you it meant nothing," she said. I didn't know who they were yet. I would soon. And when the hospital room went quiet, I stood alone, unaware that the years I gave freely were about to be questioned, challenged, and nearly erased. Grief barely had time to settle before it was pushed aside. The morning after Grandma passed, the house filled with noise. Voices I hadn't heard in years echoing through rooms that still smelled like her lavender lotion. People walked in without knocking, opening cabinets, sitting where she used to sit. Speaking in past tense like it gave them ownership over her memory. I stood near the doorway, numb, holding the same jacket I had wrapped around her shoulders on our last hospital trip. No one asked how I was. No one asked where I'd been sleeping for 3 years. My aunt arrived like she owned the air. Black coat, sharp heels, eyes dry. She didn't cry. She didn't hug me. She nodded once, as if checking something off a list. "We need to talk," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. She gathered us in the living room, the same place Grandma used to nap in the afternoons. Without sitting down, my aunt reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of papers. The sound of them hitting the coffee table felt heavier than the silence that followed. "I have power of attorney," she announced. "I've had it for a while. I didn't fully understand what that meant yet, but the way she smiled told me it mattered. She looked straight at me. You were just helping out, and we appreciate that. But this house, everything in it, it's not yours. The words landed like a slap. Before I could speak, she stood, waving the document in the air like a verdict. I'm in charge now. I'll be handling the estate. I tried to explain. About the nights, the care, the years. My voice shook, and the room stayed cold. Relatives avoided my eyes. A cousin shrugged. Someone whispered, it's legal. My aunt's voice rose, sharp and clear. You need to start packing. This isn't your place anymore. Not yours. 3 years of my life reduced to 2 words. She followed me down the hallway, pointing at rooms like she was already measuring them. Take only what's yours. I don't want confusion. I watched her toss aside the blanket Grandma used every night, calling it old junk. My chest burned, but I swallowed it. Fighting felt useless. Grief had already drained me. By evening, my things were stacked near the door. Clothes, books, a framed photo of Grandma and me in the garden. That was it. As I stepped outside, my aunt locked the door behind me. The sound clicked final. Don't come back without calling first, she said. I'll be renovating. I stood on the porch as the sun dipped low, staring at the house that had been my whole world. The windows reflected a stranger now. That night, I slept on a friend's couch. I stared at the ceiling, replaying Grandma's last words. Don't let them tell you it meant nothing. Days passed, no calls, no condolences, just silence, and the echo of being dismissed like hired help. On the 4th day, I went through my bag, searching for clean clothes. My hand brushed against something stiff and familiar. I froze the yellowed folder, the one Grandma told me to keep safe. I sat up slowly, heart pounding, and untied the faded ribbon. Inside were old documents, copies, notes, dates handwritten in Grandma's careful script. I didn't understand all of it. But one thing stood out, a property record and a date from years ago, before her illness, before the POA. Before my aunt decided I was nothing, my phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence. Unknown number. For the first time since Grandma died, I felt something other than loss. I felt the ground shift. I stared at the phone until it stopped buzzing, then started again. Unknown number. For a moment, I considered letting it go. After everything, I didn't trust surprises anymore. But something in my chest tight, insistent, told me this wasn't random. I answered, hello. Is this or you the caregiver for Mrs. Eleanor Hayes? The woman asked, careful and professional. I said quietly. This is the county title office. We're calling regarding a property record tied to her estate. My heart skipped. I sat down hard on the edge of the couch, gripping the phone. There's a discrepancy, she continued. And your name appears on a deed transfer dated 3 years ago. We need to verify some details. 3 years. The room blurred. That was the year Grandma fell the first time, the year everyone vanished, the year I moved in. I have some documents, I managed. Please bring them in, she said gently. And for your awareness, power of attorney does not override recorded ownership. When the call ended, I stayed frozen, phone still pressed to my ear. The sentence echoed again and again. Does not override recorded ownership. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The papers suddenly felt heavier, like they carried weight I hadn't understood before. Deeds, copies of filings, a notarized transfer of title signed, stamped, and dated. Grandma had done this quietly. Carefully, I saw her handwriting in the margins, small notes to herself. Dates circled, names underlined. One sentence written in pencil near the edge made my throat close. Love stays, power leaves. At the title office the next morning, everything was calm. Too calm for what I felt inside. The clerk reviewed the documents, nodded, typed, then looked up at me with a measured smile. You are the legal owner of the property, she said. Your aunt's POA covered medical and temporary financial decisions only. Ownership was transferred to you long before that. I felt lightheaded. She kicked me out. The clerk's expression shifted, professional, but sympathetic. We flagged an attempted inquiry to list the property for sale. That's what triggered our review. My aunt. She had already tried to sell Grandma's house. There will need to be a formal meeting. The clerk continued. All interested parties will be notified. It's better this is resolved face to face. A meeting, I nodded, though my hands trembled. As I left the building, memories rushed in Grandma's voice, her squeezed hand, the way she made me promise nothing but to stay. She had stayed ahead of them all. That afternoon, I returned to the house for the first time since being locked out. Not inside, just across the street. The curtains were different. Boxes were stacked near the garage. Someone else was already rearranging a life they never lived. My phone chimed, an email confirmation. Property review meeting mandatory attendance. I knew my aunt would come armed with confidence and outrage. She always did, but this time she wouldn't be holding the loudest paper in the room. That night I barely slept. I replayed every moment I had questioned myself. Every time I wondered if I should have asked for help. For recognition, for something in writing. Grandma had seen all of it. She hadn't needed me to ask. In the quiet hours before dawn, I finally understood why she insisted I keep that folder. It wasn't about money. It was about protection. She knew exactly who would show up after she was gone, and she had already decided who deserved to stay. When morning came, I dressed simply, no black coat, no performance, just calm, because the truth doesn't need to shout. And tomorrow the house would finally speak for itself. The conference room smelled like paper and polish, neutral, official, unforgiving. A long table sat in the center, lined with folders placed precisely at each seat, as if order itself had been invited to witness the truth. I arrived early and chose the chair closest to the window. My hands rested calmly in my lap, surprising me. 3 days ago I would have been shaking. Now there was a quiet steadiness inside me, like Grandma's hand on my shoulder. My aunt arrived 10 minutes late. She swept in wearing confidence like armor, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She didn't look at me at first. Instead, she smiled at the title officer, placed her purse down, and sighed dramatically. "Let's get this over with," she said. "I have contractors waiting." That was when she finally noticed me. Her smile faltered for half a second, then hardened. "I didn't know you were invited." The title officer cleared his throat. "All listed parties are required to attend." My aunt scoffed and sat back. "This won't take long. I have power of attorney." The officer nodded politely. "Yes, we have that on record. But today's meeting concerns ownership." A folder slid open, pages turned. Silence stretched. The officer spoke clearly, evenly. The property at 214 Willow Lane was transferred by deed from Eleanor Hayes to... He looked up, 3 years and 2 months ago. The room went still. My aunt laughed once, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "That's impossible. She was sick." She didn't understand. The deed was notarized. The officer continued, unbothered. "Filed properly. There is no evidence of coercion. Power of attorney does not negate ownership." Color drained from my aunt's face. "That house is mine," she snapped. "I'm her daughter. She was my grandmother." I said softly. It was the first time I'd spoken. And I stayed. The officer slid another document across the table. Additionally, there was an attempted request to list the property for sale. As the requester is not the legal owner, this constitutes potential fraud. My aunt stood abruptly, chair scraping loud against the floor. "This is a setup. She manipulated her. You manipulated her." I didn't raise my voice. She knew exactly what she was doing. Her anger had nowhere to land. The truth sat heavy and unmovable between us. The officer folded his hands. "Ownership stands. You will need to vacate the property within 14 days. 14 days. The same woman who had thrown me out without notice now had a deadline. My aunt gathered her papers in shaking hands. For the first time, she looked small, not defeated, exposed. As she passed me, she hissed, "You think you've won." I met her eyes. I think Grandma did. When I returned to the house, it was quiet again. The boxes were gone. The curtains hung unevenly where someone had rushed. I unlocked the door slowly, listening to the familiar creak. Inside, everything felt like it had been holding its breath. I walked room to room, touching the walls, the table, the chair by the window where Grandma used to sit. I sat there now, closing my eyes. You knew. I whispered. In the drawer beside the chair, I found a folded note in her handwriting. Just one line. Love doesn't shout, but it signs. I didn't cry then. I smiled, because the sweetest revenge wasn't taking something back. It was realizing it had been mine all along,